Hi everyone. I know it's been a really long time since I've been making regular videos. As you probably know, I moved across the country. Building a new life is very time consuming, but I'm finally feeling ready to maybe dip my toe back in and be more of a presence on the channel again. And I wanted to kick things off by sharing an update on my depth year, which has officially concluded. I was a rebel and I started last year in March, and so it's now March, and so I am officially released from my depth year. And I'm really glad that I did it. I learned a lot from it, and I wanted to share some of the key points that I gained from this experience with you. So the parameters of my depth year were primarily around learning. So I agreed not to purchase new books. I agreed not to enroll in any new ongoing courses. I did not include things like clothes buying or home buying, like because I bought, a house and I had to buy stuff to put in my house. I agreed not to buy any new tarot decks. Or Oracle. We're including all of the kinds of decks in this. So I followed through on those parameters fairly well. I did not enroll in any new courses. I did not buy any new decks. I did, towards the end, purchase some new books. Primarily, they were at the recommendation of my therapist, that she wanted me to read those for my own growth, specifically around some very particular issues. And so I felt like that was something that I wanted to be flexible around because I'm invested in my growth. And so when someone that I trust says, I think really this is a step that you need to take, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm going to wait until March because I'm on a depth year. So I bent the rules for a couple of circumstances. Something else I did was that I actually ended up canceling my Audible membership. So I get to still keep all of the books that I purchased, but I no longer am purchasing new Audible books. I have close to 100 titles in my Audible library, most of which I have not read yet. So I feel like until I catch up, I'm not going to re-engage in my Audible subscription. The first thing that I learned was about slowing down. I have a tendency to pile on responsibilities, obligations, relationships, courses, learning, this, that, hobbies, a million hobbies. A lot of what my depth year was about was being like, oh, what if I stopped doing a million things, right? What if I did nothing for a little while? What if I slowed way down? This was a combination of my brain injury, which has definitely forced me to slow down, and the consequences of not being able to purchase new books or new courses really forced me to look at, what are my expectations around learning? Like, why am I so intent on consuming all of this media in such a voracious manner? I was able to notice that I was actually kind of afraid to slow down. Like, what is my mind gonna be like if I slow down? What's gonna happen if I'm not constantly stuffing my head with things? What will my self-worth be like if I can't measure it based on what I'm achieving? Our society gives us a lot of incentives to move at a very fast pace, and it can be a really radical act to say, no, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna spend time every day doing nothing, I'm gonna slow down, I'm not gonna meet those expectations, and I'm just gonna be, we aren't made evolutionarily to run constantly, going all the time, not sleeping, not resting. That is not how we were designed to exist. I want to say that there was some research that shows that medieval peasants had more free time than we do. That's terrible. We are moving in the wrong direction. We need to slow down. There is so much benefit to our nervous system, to our mind, to our relationships, and our well-being when we don't move at a breakneck pace. Even though my depth year is ending, I definitely want to continue this practice of moving more slowly. It has given me a lot of benefit, and I want to just keep going with that energy. The second thing I learned was about lowering my expectations. I realized that my expectations of myself were so unreasonable. Who the hell is able to move across the country, simultaneously learn 5 different languages, finish their yoga teacher certification, work full time, meditate every day? That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. And so I learned that, my expectations were just not reasonable. A lot of my goals are really worthwhile things, but I realized I need to break them down into bite-sized pieces and to take into consideration what other obligations I have going on at any one point in time. And then to think about, what can I reasonably fit in, around these other big things that I have to do? So if I'm working 40 hours a week, that's gonna limit the amount of time that I have to devote to other things. If I am busy moving into a house, I might not have a lot of free time to work on my French. And that's okay. And lowering those expectations doesn't mean that I'm not committed to excellence. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or a lazy person or a stupid person. It actually means that I'm a pretty wise person for respecting my own limits and only putting on my plate what I can reasonably handle. The third thing I learned was around my shopping patterns. I've known for some time that sometimes for me, shopping and spending money can be something that I do when I'm anxious. It can be sort of this unhealthy coping mechanism, a very expensive, unhealthy coping mechanism. And I'd switched from buying some more expensive things to purchasing books because you can get books very cheaply. But having the depth year forced me to think about like, what can I do to cope with my anxiety if I can't purchase books constantly? And I found a lot of other things that I could use. I dove more into my meditation practice. I started to think more about like, how can I reach out to friends or other loved ones for support when I'm anxious? Can I go on a walk? Can I play with my cat? How about like cooking a meal or giving myself a foot massage? So there are any number of things that I can do that actually help me to regulate more effectively even than the book buying did. And it also is just more reasonable because ultimately I was buying all these books and I wasn't reading most of them. It's not that I don't want to read them, it's just that I can't keep, even I'm a fast reader, like a really fast reader, but even I have more books than I could possibly read in like a year, even if I just sat and read books full time. So that was a big clue to me, like, hey, maybe this pattern isn't actually helping me. Maybe I need to look at it, develop a different pattern. Most of us have something that we do on autopilot when we're really anxious. For some people, it's eating, or it's sex, or it could be drugs, or, shopping, as in my case, or watching Netflix, or compulsively scrolling. If you notice that there's something that you do frequently on autopilot when you're really anxious, maybe just be curious about that, right? You don't have to be like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, I need to stop it cold turkey. But just notice what happens when you're in that mode and notice, does this feel good? Are there elements about it that feel pleasurable? Are there some things about it that are unhelpful? And just be really curious about your experience. Speaking of curiosity, number 4 was that I just came back into touch with my love of learning. I'm a very curious person. I love to learn new things. I love finding new exciting hobbies or skills. I love adding to my tool belt. And so that's something that I want to keep carrying through me as I move through my life. That's something that I'm going to make a priority when I'm evaluating how I'm spending my time and energy. In the past, I'd also perceived learning as a more solitary pursuit, and now I'm trying to move towards more relational learning. How can I engage in learning processes that involve me connecting with other people? Because there's a lot to be gained from that. And so it also, it builds community, right? Like when we go, say we become part of a yoga teacher training, we're then connecting with all these different people. We're learning from them, we're learning with them, and that's a really valuable thing. I don't plan to stop reading books in my house anytime soon, and I'm also making efforts to learn and teach, to engage on both ends of the learning process in community. Number 5 is about passive learning. So let me explain what that means. Sometimes I think about my mind or my being as kind of a crock pot, right? And sometimes we approach a problem from a very active place where we start, thinking through, we analyze, we problem solve, we do all these things. And sometimes that's really useful and helpful. Other times I think about my mind as a crock pot. I put everything in there, I put the lid on, and then I don't think about it. I walk away from it, I let it sit for a while. This is often a thing I do during meditation or when we say, sleep on it. That's kind of what that's referring to. And sometimes I find that solutions, clarity, insights come more easily when I'm not trying to catch them like butterflies in the air, right? I'm just allowing a process to happen. I'm letting my subconscious do its thing to offer me something of benefit. There are many problems that we encounter that we cannot think our way out of. And so this passive form of learning offers up a lot of benefit to us. Don't discount what good can come of you planting seeds in your mind, allowing those to grow and germinate on their own. Sometimes we are learning, we are growing without even knowing that it's happening. And then we look back, 10 years later and we say, wow, like I wasn't necessarily actively engaging around that, but I had set an intention and I had planted a seed, and now I can see that that's really coming to fruition. I think I've talked before about how my loving kindness practice had all of these unintended benefits. There were some relationships that I thought could not be redeemed, were just terrible, were never going to get any better. And I did the loving kindness practice without really thinking about any of those relationships. But over time, slowly found that there was an openness in my heart that wasn't there before when I approached these relationships. And I do attribute that to my loving kindness practice. And again, that was sort of an incidental thing that happened. I don't think I could have sat down and been like, oh, I'm going to love these people, I'm going to be more kind to them, and have that really feel organic. But just planting the seed, allowing the practice to work, suddenly something had changed. Don't underestimate the power of passive learning and transformation. Of course, this is not an excuse for us to just take the back seat and say, like, I'm not going to bother working on myself, I'm not going to bother learning anything, right? But just know that the active mind, the discursive mind, is not our only tool when it comes to learning and growth. Finally, a big part of my depth year was being able to step back and recognize that I've actually already accomplished a lot, and I have a lot of strengths and qualities that I admire in myself. It's easy to get really future-oriented, think I've got to achieve all these goals, I've got to learn new skills, I've got to keep it fresh and interesting, I've got to keep growing and changing, and to not appreciate what it is that I've already accomplished. We are often our own worst critic. We are often harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. If you are like me and you are a perfectionist, know that there's a really big difference between striving for excellence and an unhealthy relationship towards achievement in our lives. Sometimes what's driving us to achieve is that we don't feel worthy. We don't feel like anyone is going to love us or that anyone could maintain love for us if we are not constantly achieving things. And that's a lie, right? That is not accurate. We are worthy of love, of respect, of validation, whether or not we're like winning a Nobel Prize or getting another PhD. I would so much rather my journey of learning be about moving towards something that I love than trying to run away from feelings of inadequacy. And I hope the same for you. I hope that in your life you can couple learning with fun, with enjoyment, with excitement and curiosity, rather than with feelings of unworthiness or inadequacy. So to summarize, I got a lot out of my depth year. I learned more about slowing down, learned a lot about lowering my expectations and making reasonable goals. I got a chance to practice some new ways of coping besides compulsively buying books. I came to appreciate my love of learning and my sense of curiosity. I became more aware of passive change and the ability of my subconscious to solve problems for me. And finally, I recognized my strengths and my accomplishments and worked on trying to not see my self-worth as being so tied to achievements. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe you did a depth year. I'd love to know how it went for you. Maybe you're curious about doing one yourself. Feel free to ask any questions or let me know your thoughts. Thanks again for coming by to check this out. Don't forget to like and subscribe.